I'm at Hoover Institution today, and it's a pleasure to speak with Eric Hanushek, who is a senior research fellow here, and he is also the author of a book, Schoolhouses, Courthouses and Statehouses. It's a new book that looks at the history of litigation, of finance litigation in America. And the timing is good for the book because we heard last week that there soon will be a suit claiming that California schools are chronically underfunded by the California School Boards Association and the and ACSA, the Association of California School Administrators, and perhaps others. So, Eric, now you're a skeptic, and again, thank you for coming and speaking with us today. You're a skeptic of adequacy suits, and your book provides much evidence of that. And let me just make a quote here, take a quote. Virtually no peer-reviewed or other credible studies or articles have found significant positive effects of student achievement in states that have implemented adequacy remedies. So, Eric, why in general should we be wary of adequacy suits? And we'll talk about California in specific in a minute.
Well, the problem with adequacy suits is that they presume that the most fundamental issue in student achievement is getting more funds into the school. But we've been actually running that experiment for a long time in the U.S., in all of the states of the U.S., of dramatically increasing funding, and we've had flat NAEP scores, National Assessment of Educational Progress scores, and that should give us a hint. If you look actually at states that have had these adequacy suits, we see even a bigger story because there have been dramatic increases in funding in some states caused by the courts. And you trace out what has happened and you see that they don't do any better than states that haven't had this dramatic increase.
Now, in your book also looks at various studies, and I think you cited there are several California studies that looked at costs and perhaps remedies to bring California scores up, and you found a range there of costs. What's wrong with the way that we go about and study the costs related to education?
Well, the fundamental problem with all of the cost studies where people try to tell the courts or the legislature how much they should spend is that they can't do it, that there's no scientific way to do that. And the reason is that we've found that there's no really consistent or systematic relationship between what's spent on schools and achievement. So therefore it's hard to do the opposite. Say if you want to reach some level of achievement, how much do we have to spend? Because the research and evidence just doesn't support it.
Now, much of your book deals with cases nationally in which gobs of money were spent with little to show. But now we're talking about California, in which there have been huge cutbacks in education funding, and depending which measure you use, it's either 30th, or if you throw in cost of living, it's 46th, and probably heading to 50th. So under what basis can one say that California schools are not adequately funded?
Well, let me start the other way around. Okay. There was a large set of studies in California to try to look at schools in California, and that fed into the Governor's Commission on Educational Excellence. The underlying message of these studies was simply that if you just put more money into California schools, you should expect to see nothing at the other end. Maybe some happier teachers, maybe some happier administrators, but nothing in the way of student achievement. Now, going to your question more directly, I think that if we could improve some of the elements of the California schools, then we might see that money had a big impact, and we might want to put more money into our schools one way or another through the legislative action or what have you. But you can't start with the money because all of the experience suggests that on average you're not going to get anything out of it. Some districts will do okay, they'll find a way to use it, other districts will just squander the money. And what we have to have is a system that improves the way money is used so that when we put money in from Sacramento, it sticks.
Now you, of course, were on the Excellence Committee, the Governor's Committee, and now I believe that probably that study will be cited by the plaintiffs in the case because you did cite through weighted student averages a need for more money coupled, as you said, with different reforms. But it clearly will be used in the case by the plaintiffs. So, how would you respond to that?
Well, any lawsuit, you can't quite predict how it will go. I think there's a good chance that the commission report will be used. The first thing that the commission report says, which I firmly believe, is that we just simply have to do something about California schools. Our schools are not performing up to standards. They're dragging down the nation because 1/8 of the students in the U.S. go to a California schools. And these schools just aren't competitive internationally or even nationally, as we talked about. The main message of the governor's commission report was that you have to do some fundamental changes in the structure of schools. The very first thing to do is to try to get Sacramento less involved in what goes on in local schools. Sacramento is really good at specifying what we want to achieve, the standards, assessing our knowledge, and so forth. They're really bad at telling schools exactly how to run schools and what their needs are and how you should better get achievement. If we could get that balance right, we'd be much better off.
More local control is one of the elements then. Now your book comes out with something that you call performance-based funding as a prescription for raising achievement in schools. Talk just a minute about what that is, and also might you be interested in being a friend of the court and introducing that as a possible remedy?
Performance-based funding essentially says you can't divorce the finance of schools from policy. If you do that, you tend to get into trouble. So you tend to reward the wrong things, provide perverse incentives. And in fact, we have all kinds of perverse incentives within California schools. Performance-based funding says try to get the incentives right and use funding to provide incentives to improve student achievement, provide rewards for performance, allow parents to enter in actively through either choice or selecting how much funding goes to local schools. A variety of things that provide everybody looking in the same direction at student achievement. Now, on the issue of my role, if there were a court case, I frankly am ready to do anything that would help get California schools moving in the right direction. I think it's extraordinarily important for California, and it's equally as important for the nation as a whole, because we are not competitive internationally, and this makes a big difference if you project out what this could mean to the U.S. economy. The past history suggests that we will be much worse off in the future if we don't do something to fix our schools.
Now, when the Excellence Committee made its report, that was at a time, in fact, before major cuts in school spending. We projected, in fact, there would be more revenue coming. So that they were sort of behind the eight ball here. Can you foresee, as part of a grand compromise, hopefully perhaps an out-of-court settlement, because in your book pointed out these things can go on for decades in litigation, that there may be an additional money in exchange for some of what you're advocating through performance-based funding?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think that is the kind of compromise that I see as being really important. It's very important for when you change policies so that you move to a system that, for example, rewards highly effective teachers but tries to help ineffective teachers out of the classroom. You have to compensate teachers for the change in contract. Mm-hmm. And so things like that are naturals for a bargain, where we will increase the size of the contract for teachers and for administrators if they accept a little bit more risk, a risk that they won't have a permanent job no matter how badly they do.
Well, Eric Hanushek, thank you very much for speaking with us. I highly recommend the book, Schoolhouses, Courthouses, and Statehouses, and we look forward to hearing more as this case, if it in fact unfolds. We'd like to come back and talk with you again.
I'd love to do it. Thanks, John.
John Fensterwald for Educated Guests. Thanks for watching.